It takes a lot of ingredients to fix or build a car, like cooking, but without the frozen dinner easy way out. eBay Motors has 122 million parts. It's always the right fitment, so you can follow any recipe to a T. Whether it's a vintage Italian coupe that's classic like Grandma's meatballs or a German luxury car that's as complicated as Oma's rouladen, to cook up something great in the garage, use the eBay Motors app or visit ebaymotors.com. Let's ride.
Some coffee's fast, but not fresh. Some coffee's fresh, but only after a long wait. Speedway Coffee is made fresh at the push of a button, hot or iced, so you can have fresh coffee your way, right away. Get 2 times the points when you buy any size hot or iced coffee drink with Speedy Rewards.
Okay, so I wanted to give this little disclaimer before the episode started. In my segments of the yearly recap, there are some stories that I did mention where I was talking about it previously in the show. That was my previously recorded news and gossipish segment, which I had to scrap because of the length of the episode. So if you hear me a couple of times say, like I mentioned earlier, please ignore that completely and just go on and listen to all of my favorite moments of the year and just relax and just know that was a mistake that was made on the part of your girl Stephanie. I'm only human. I am not perfect. So this is just a little disclaimer telling you what's going on. Thank you and enjoy the rest of this episode. Love y'all.
Yeah. Making her way to the mic. They start dimming the lights. You start feeling alright. From Birmingham, home of the Teddy Longs, and the room is studded. More once you discover. For all of the lovers, Whitney Houston and Roman Reigns. For all of the lovers, and Mickey James and Marvin Gaye. For all of the lovers, and Sasha Banks, Janelle Monáe, Silk, Sonic, and Paige. Allow me to say, look, I just found a place, sweet escape. Every one of us, I was kinda late, so I just made it off the struggle bus. Walking by the fate, cause I know it's right in front of us. Yo, I ain't with the hate, gotta focus on what's great. Ladies and gentlemen, Steph Hardy is on the air. Had to drop a couple bars just to make you all aware. So, sit back, relax, enjoy the show. You know I go by Joe or the rest of the flow.
Hey y'all, welcome to the season 3 finale of the Hardy Wrestling Podcast with your girl Stephanie Hardy. So on this show, I have the amazing and talented AEW referee and podcast host Aubrey Edwards as a guest, and I'm going to talk about my yearly recap where I talk about my favorite moments in wrestling from this year. And of course, right now you're listening to one of them, being Josiah Williams, aka Wrestling Flow, doing this theme song. Thank you, sir. So please sit back, relax, and listen to this episode of the Hardy Wrestling Podcast. Catch the vibe, y'all. All right, so on the Hardy Wrestling Podcast, I am so happy and honored to have the awesome referee and just Jill of all trades, Aubrey Edwards, on. Like, how are you? I'm so happy to have you here.
I'm doing absolutely great, and I definitely appreciate your gendered use of the word Jill of all trades. Very, very happy. Thank you. Appreciate that very much.
Oh, definitely. Because, you know, it's like you can say jack of all trades, but, you know, I mean, but you're a woman, so it's best to say Jill. I like saying Jill of all trades.
Let's promote the ladies as best we can. So I'm always down.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. So I'm going to start by asking you what I ask all of my guests on this show, and that's, when did you fall in love with wrestling?
So I've told this story before, but now it's become very funny. I fell in love with wrestling when I saw CM Punk do the pipe bomb. I had only watched wrestling once before then. It was WrestleMania 27. I got together with a bunch of friends. I didn't know anything that was happening. I had to Google The Undertaker, literally know nothing at all about wrestling. And I just happened to watch the pipe bomb, which I think was like 3 months later. And immediately it was like, oh my God, this is incredible. I don't know what's real. I don't know what's not real. How much of this is him being a character versus how much of this is him being real. And now it's like the fact that I work with someone like CM Punk is kind of just like trippy. to me, he's still like this big celebrity, but like at the same time, he texts me and like talks crap about my hockey team. So like, this is my life, and it's wild.
That's funny. It's so funny that you would say that, because I actually went to WrestleMania 27. I was like 17 years old, and that was like the last wrestling event, the last big wrestling event I went to before I was starting college. So that was a big deal for me. I was so excited, you know, to be there with my sister and my dad and stuff. And it's so great that it was the pipe bomb that kind of set it off for you. Like, if you're gonna start somewhere, you're gonna start with the bang. Yeah, and then the fact that you're working with him now, like, that has to be a cool full circle moment.
It's wild. It's absolutely wild. We did this like little we're doing this big marketing event coming up this summer, and me and him worked together to do some promo shots last weekend, Wednesday, and we're like both sitting in the makeup chair, and I'm just, you ever have those moments where you sit back and go, what is my life? Like,
Yes.
That's kind of what I'm feeling like right now, more so than I have like any of the last 3 years of this AEW adventure.
Yeah, that's basically been me all this year. But yeah, we're here to talk about you. So before wrestling, did you have anything that you did professionally sort of before you decided to pursue wrestling as a career?
Yeah, I had kind of like an entire different I had an entirely different life that I led before wrestling. I'm originally a software developer, so I worked in video games for 10, 11 years or so. I actually went to college to get my computer science degree, so I am a programmer. I'm a huge nerd. I worked on, I think I shipped 6 different video games. I've worked on 12 or 13 at this point. I do work with AEW games, so I've kind of come full circle in that respect. But yeah, I had a full-on career and like all these other things that I was doing. And then outside of that, I was dancing classical ballet, which had been a hobby of mine since I was 9 years old. So it was sort of, I did the software development during the week and then the ballet in the evenings and on the weekend. And then once I turned about 30, ballet just sort of got replaced with wrestling. So I was doing wrestling practice, or referee practice on the evenings, and then doing indie bookings on the weekends.
Wow, that is so amazing. It's like it's like ballet, and then you have wrestling thrown in there, and then you have software developing. Like it's like the entire gambit of STEM and arts all mixed into one person. That's amazing.
I'm very good at cocktail events. I have a lot of things I can talk about.
Oh my goodness. Wow, that is amazing. Like, so when you were pursuing wrestling, were those passions of yours hard to sort of like put to the side or give up, or in a sense, but not really give fully up?
So it was interesting from sort of 2 perspectives. Like, I never trained as a wrestler. I actually had 0 interest in ever becoming a wrestler. I was more than content being a fan. My husband was doing some work on the indies, and I was more than fine being like supportive wife and whatnot, because I was, you know, dancing and doing my shows and stuff. I was working with a local nonprofit dance organization, so I was real busy with that. And then roughly right around the time I turned 30, it was like my pre-midlife crisis. I had to leave dance for a number of reasons. It kills your body, and I was just falling apart. There was a number of emotional, mental health reasons why I needed to leave, but I left dance, got really depressed because dance is one of those things that just allows you to sort of express yourself, and I didn't realize how big a part of my life that was. So I actually had a friend reach out to me and say, hey, have you ever tried reffing, or thought that maybe that could be something? I'm like, why would I do that? So it was sort of easy to just like slot one thing in for another, because as soon as I go to a couple practices, I learned that wrestling is just another art form. It's the great American performance art. It's even more, to me, it's more fascinating because it's the only one that has a symbiotic relationship with its audience, where based on what the audience is doing in real time, you can actually change what the performers are doing. That's not something you experience with movies or television or even classical dance. So that is really what drew me in. And ultimately, I mean, I'd been doing a career for 10, 11, 12 years at this point, and it's one of those, I was more than content to stay in games and do this referee thing on the side as a hobby, because that is how I lived my entire adult life up to that point. But when the opportunity presented itself to make AEW my primary focus, I'd be kind of silly to say no. So I took a pause on the software development side of my life for a couple months, and then once AEW figured out that I knew how to make video games, I started working in our games division. So lucky me, I ended up doing both. So
Yeah, you know, your story sounds kind of similar to my story with music as well. Like, I was sort of the choir girl, so I was making all of my life about singing all of the time until you get out in the real world and you're just like, oh Lord, what? And then you sort of have a little bit of a crisis, you know, towards your mid-20s, you know, late 20s in my case, and you're trying to figure out, well, what is it about me that can actually stick, and what will I feel happy doing? And you know, and just like you, wrestling turned out to be that thing, you know, because I had been watching it since I was 4. And it's just like, you know, I never expected wrestling to become so much of, you know, a huge monster of, you know, in my life, the way that it's become. But I'm really happy in that world. And it seems like you found a sense of fulfillment in that as well.
100%. And I think there's, like, it's the fulfillment that I knew I needed, the ability to perform in front of an audience and to get that satisfaction, but also it's become much bigger than that. It's the fact that there aren't a lot of female referees, and now I'm using my platform to kind of change a little bit about what people see this role as. I get to reach out to other people and talk about mental health. I get to talk about being a bisexual woman. Like, there's so many different things that wrestling has afforded me that I never ever could have imagined. So not only is it just the personal satisfaction, but it's being able to help make a positive impact in the world.
Yeah, definitely. It's always great when you can use your platform to sort of, you know, help others and not make it all about you, because at the end of the day, you know, we have to do, you know, what's best, you know, not only just for ourselves, but also to help others as well. So it's really great that you're passionate about using your platform to help others in that way. So when you started, you know, your wrestling journey, who exactly trained you, you know, in terms of wrestling and refereeing? And basically, what were the best lessons that you learned during that training time?
Oh boy. I was trained at unfortunately they're no longer around. The pandemic sort of put the nail in the coffin for them, but there was a local promotion in Seattle called 3-2-1 Battle. And I'd say the easiest comparison is if you took Jakara and added a lot of swearing. That's what 3-2-1 Battle was. It's very comedy focused, very over the top, very performative, more than very hardcore wrestling. Not to say that we didn't have that. There was one time I've reffed multiple amazing technical matches through that promotion that are all super deep with, like, Negro Navarro, Timothy Thatcher, like all of these guys that are big names in that scene had come through there. So that was sort of like where my start was. And I would say I have 2 coaches. There was Chris Samuels, who was our head referee, and then Steve West, who was the booker and promoter for the promotion. He was our head coach. So I sort of had those 2 guys guiding me down the path of referee. So I had someone guiding me in my basics, what it is that I needed to do as far as, like, filling the role, how I handle different situations in the ring, before and after matches, all those things. But then also having the wrestler perspective from Steve was really important, because we're all one team in the ring. I always tell people that the referee's number one job is to tell a story, but it's never your story you're telling. It's always the wrestlers. So you can study till you're blue in the face about what it means to be a referee, but understanding how your role impacts the wrestler and what it is they're trying to do, I think, is vitally important.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a lot of people really don't take that into account a lot of the time, because they're so focused on the stars. And it's cool to be focused on the stars and everything, but a lot of people really don't put into perspective how important referees are either. So I'm glad you were able, you know, to learn that. In fact, I actually enjoy watching the referees, you know, as they sort of matriculate through a match, and how they sort of help to, you know, just be able to move everything forward and maybe move stuff backwards, kicking people out and all that other stuff. Like, it's important. Like, it's a pretty important part. So I'm really glad that you had that experience. So it's just like, a lot of people just don't take that into account. So I'm glad that was a thing that you learned. So how exactly, you know, has the wrestling scene treated you, you know, since you had started your referee journey?
I have had, like, a really fantastic journey through wrestling, and I know wrestling can be it can be a lot of things to different people, and I think a lot of it is I was surrounded by a lot of very supportive individuals. The Seattle wrestling scene is very close-knit, and I think having attended shows for a year and a half beforehand and then becoming a performer myself, there was already an understanding of, I knew the product, I appreciated the product, I had a fascination for everything that my now, locker mates were doing. But it ultimately made getting into wrestling very easy because I started in Seattle, but a lot of my indies was, down in Portland, Oregon, or Vancouver, British Columbia. So between 3 and 4 hours east and north and south. But all of us ended up working together. So it's a very great group of people who all build each other up and give each other opportunities. So if it's one of those groups that if you worked hard, you got the spot. They made sure that you had, a great platform, that, oh, you're kicking ass, cool, we're going to put you in the main event at this big show. Like, it was really, really great to just be afforded those opportunities and get to work with awesome talent that was coming through. Worked a lot of big shows that, like, say, Defy ended up getting really big right around that time, and they were bringing in major talent. And I always personally feel that you become a better at anything when you work with different people and work with people who are more experienced than you. So being able to work with people who had television experience helped make me a better referee. And eventually it came down to, I ran into Frankie Kazarian at an indie right before AEW got announced, and turns out we have an excellent time working together that night. He remembers my name, and the rest is history. Gives my name to the Bucks, and then 5 months later I'm in Vegas.
Cool. So it sounds like you had a really great support system, and that's really good to hear, because in some cases, depending, on different people's, experiences, sometimes they do have a great support system, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they feel like they have to go it alone. But in your case, it seems like you really did have people who really had your back. So that's 100%. So that's really good to hear from that perspective. So would you say that you have a strong fan base?
Oh boy. I would say I have a strong enough fan base that there was justification to make an action figure of me. So, which is wildly fascinating, and to this day, I'm just like, how is it even possible? It's incredibly humbling, because rarely in like the last few years, like, referees' names have been said on television, and that's something that we've been doing since day one at AEW, because referees are performers just as the wrestlers are, and we want to give them the credit for what they're doing on screen and the work they're putting in the ring. So the fact that people even know who I am is kind of like, I appreciate that. But then seeing like the Twitter following and the Instagram following and just seeing it completely skyrocket, I'm like, why do people care? You have always had that imposter syndrome of like, what is it that I'm doing? Like, I literally just wear stripes and I yell at people who play fight in their underwear. Like, why do I have all this acclaim? But I think it's because in wrestling and in a lot of forms of media nowadays, people like to follow people that they believe in and people that they see as organic and who are true to themselves. And I'm extremely appreciative that AEW has allowed me to be myself. I always say, like, I'm an actress playing a referee on TV. Like, I'm actually Brittany, and I play a character named Aubrey. And I think people see that a little bit. They see that it's me, and they see my experiences come through and who I am as a person on TV. They see that authority figure. It's like, well, I was a project manager for a long time, so a lot of that kind of feeds into it. But it's great, because I see a lot of positive conversations happening on my Twitter, on Instagram, on AEW's Twitter. It's just completely fascinating. So it's to have the idea that a ref can be popular, and like, it's still just completely fascinating to me. It's like, oh, did you know you have the #1 selling action figure? Like, what is my life? This doesn't make any sense. So I'm just appreciative of everything. I know it could all be gone tomorrow, so I'm just riding the wave.
Yeah, and I want to say congratulations, because I know that has to be a huge deal to have an action figure. Like, the idea that kids, you know, see you on TV and then they want to buy it, and they were like, I want to play and I want to be Ref Aubrey. Like, you know, like all these kids grabbing action figures, like, I'm gonna be Cody, I'm gonna be this person, I'm gonna be Aubrey,
I want to be Aubrey.
Right? Like, that's gotta be lit. Like,
it's so cool.
It's incredible.
My mom texted me a picture. She actually put my action figure in the Christmas tree and said, I made you an ornament, and then sent me a video of the cat batting me down. Like, it's just like this. Who would have ever thought that this conversation could even be happening right now?
That is so wonderful. That is so cute. You're in a tree and the cat. Cats just love to knock stuff down, don't they?
Cat doesn't care. Cat just wants Aubrey out of the tree.
Exactly. So you did mention about how the pandemic affected a place where you used to train. So how exactly would you say the pandemic affected your career in any way, shape, or form? And how were you able to bounce back from that?
I would say the biggest thing is I was still doing indies regularly prior to the pandemic. AEW is really a giving company, and they allow us the flexibility to work with companies outside of just AEW. Of course, it's all on a case-by-case basis, but I was still actively very involved in my local scene, which is great because I wanted to give back to the people that helped give me the ability to be successful. So watching all of that sort of shut down during the pandemic was incredibly sad, especially because I have so many friends in wrestling where that was their primary source of income, and all of a sudden that dries up, and it's heart-wrenching, and it almost feels guilty in a way because we were extremely fortunate to be based out of Florida and being able to travel to Jacksonville to still put on shows even in empty arenas. That, you know, for me, my travel schedule changed, but I was still working, and to understand how grateful we absolutely were in that moment to be able to still do what we do made me so appreciative. So as Washington State started to open up things and we've started to do shows again, I've been making sure that I go back and I attend all the shows and I support all my indie wrestlers, because I want our scene to grow back to where it was before, to the booming side of it. So I'm trying to just do what I can to support how I can. So like, for instance, I mean, I'm coming out to Alabama in January for my first indie gig since the pandemic. So I'm terrified. I'm not gonna lie. It's like, oh man, I don't know how to like ref on the indies anymore. I might die.
Well, I can say as a fan, experiencing the pandemic and experiencing wrestling, you know, in the eyes of this pandemic, it was really hard because I was wondering, you know, how this was going to affect wrestling, because it's just like, you know, for such a long time you had the ability and the option to go to shows, and then all of a sudden you don't anymore. And then when you're watching TV, you don't see people and all this other stuff. You have to, you know, get used to the arenas being empty. But something that I did appreciate was the fact that you guys, you know, were able, you know, across the board, were able to, you know, pick up and still persevere in the midst of that. And it was wrestling is always, you know, a great escape. And it was always really nice to sort of, you know, forget about everything that was going on with, you know, that hard time that we're still technically in, and be able to, you know, escape into something that was still going on, because wrestling was still happening while a lot of sports weren't. And
Correct.
it was just so nice to be able to sort of, you know, bask in the glow of still having wrestling, even though it was a little bit different, you know. And even though the indies, of course, you know, have a little bit more of a harder time sort of bouncing back from that, I'm sure that they will find their way, because they're tough, and, you know, and because we're tough, they're gonna find a way. So it's gonna work out. I'm trusting that it's gonna work out.
It will. I feel like wrestling kind
definitely
of teaches you that you need to be scrappy in order to survive and be successful. And there's a lot of scrappiness in indie wrestling. It's part of the reasons why I love it so much. You've got that, like, we just got to drive. We just got to drive forward, make it happen.
Yes, definitely. So, how exactly do you feel about the state of wrestling? Like, what's great about it to you?
What's great about it? I love that there's so much in wrestling right now. Like, for a long time, WWE was the only product on television, and now we're also a product on television, which competition always helps everyone, because then there's different options for fans, there's different options for wrestlers to work at. I think it's presenting different kinds of wrestling to people, because a lot of people see wrestling as one singular thing, but a lot of times people don't realize that wrestling is a lot like a buffet, right? Like, you don't go to a buffet and only have one kind of food. Like, some people go there and eat the steak, some people go there and eat the chicken, some people just straight up hit the dessert bar. And like, you have people like Kenny Omega and Orange Cassidy and Darby Allin. You have all these guys that have different styles and different backgrounds and different stories, and wrestling has sort of become a smorgasbord that is introduced to a new audience. And I think that's the part that I love most about wrestling right now. And even too, like, we have a very, very diverse roster. We have different, body types, different sizes, different genders, different races, different sexual orientations. Like, it's definitely become something that we can show people, you can be a wrestler and you can have success in this. You don't have to be a 6'4" dude in order to pull this off and have a living. Like, you can look like how you look, and if you're the best at what you do, there are opportunities for you.
Yeah, definitely. Like, it is really cool to see, that there's a lot more diversity in wrestling, in what you can watch. It is really fun. It kind of reminds me of how hectic the 90s kind of was. Even though I was a child and didn't understand, the science behind the numbers and all the ratings and stuff like that, because I was a child. WCW and both of those things and WWE being on television just meant that wrestling was just on, and that's all I knew. But when you grow up and you learn about how stuff actually works, you're just like, wow, like, this was actually a big deal. And you see something like what's happening now, and it's just growing more and more. And it's just, and I feel like really the winners are really all of us fans, and basically all the people
100%.
who work in it. Like, we're all the winners, and all the better for it, because there's so much wrestling, for everyone, and not just, for a specific set of people. So exactly. That's always the greater thing. So what is your stance on the state of women's wrestling now?
I think women's wrestling has come a long way since, I think if we look at, say, like the 80s or the 90s, like, women are having competitive matches that are very physical. Women are main eventing shows. Women are main eventing the biggest shows of the year. In my mind, women are equal competitors to men. And I think part of that is just, I've always seen it that way. I've always been an equal to my male counterparts. So why wouldn't female wrestlers be equal to their male counterparts, right? I really appreciate that we're getting past the like novelty aspect of it. Like, I was talking to Ruby about this on my podcast, but I reffed Ruby Soho versus Britt Baker at the Arthur Ashe Stadium for AEW Grand Slam, and the women main evented the biggest show in AEW history. But that was not a selling point. That was not something that was like, we're promoting this. It just happened to be a thing. And right. For me, that's a symbol of how far we've come as an industry, that it's no longer a checkbox that we're trying to hit. It's more or less a thing that happens that gets people excited. I know that, for instance, like Shida and Serena Deeb have this amazing feud going on right now, and when they first had a match announced, I remember seeing chatter on Twitter about it, and everyone was saying, I'm most excited about this match on the show. And I think that match itself did a great number that episode. So we see women themselves being the draw. We see women being in the main event, but we don't think about it as, oh, the women are doing really well. It's like, no, the wrestlers are doing really well. And I think that's really important and a good indication as far as where we've come as women's wrestling is concerned.
Yeah, all of that is absolutely true. I 100% agree with that. And here again, as a fan, just watching women's wrestling grow from where it has been to now, it's just been, an absolute blessing, because a part of me always wonder, when are the women going to be able to fight like the dudes? And once they did, and once, it started happening more and more and more, especially even more on a mainstream level, it's really great to witness and see, and it just lets you know that there isn't anything that you can't do. So it just makes the little girl in me very happy to see people like Ruby Soho and Dr. Britt Baker, DMD, main eventing, and it is the norm. Like, you can wake up one day and watch a wrestling show, and the women are the main event, and you don't think twice about it. Like, it's fantastic. It's like you can watch a match and see someone like you, or a Jessica Carr, or Aja Smith, refereeing, and it's normal. And it's just so wonderful that it's getting to that point, because there's going to be a new generation of women who are going to see y'all and be like, I can do that. And that's really great. And I'm just really happy that women's wrestling is growing. Of course, there's always room for improvement in all things.
There always
but I'm
always
really
is.
But I'm really happy that it is at least growing to that aspect where it's normal for women to be out at the forefront, and it's really great. And the fact that you're a part of that evolution too, like that is, I know that has to feel amazing too.
It's great. It's knowing that right now we still see reffing as this male dominated portion of the wrestling industry, and thinking about, I was actually talking to Aja about this recently, but thinking about where we're going to be 20 years from now, like, is that still going to be the perception of what reffing in wrestling is? And I don't think so. I think there's a lot of things that there's not a lot of us at this level, but what we're doing right now to sort of change the perception that when people turn on a TV and they see me reffing a match, they don't really think, well, this is going to be different than, the dudes because of X. It's like, no, this is going to be different because she's authoritative and because she doesn't take any guff from them. It's more about my personality than my gender. And that's the thing that's really valuable to me.
Yeah. Now, I have noticed that in some of the matches that you have reffed on AEW, and even in other matches, sometimes the wrestlers can get a little bit tough with you. Like, not even just the fact that they yell at you or something, but even to the point to where sometimes they'll push you or shove you. Like, is that something that you're comfortable with? Because I remember the first time I saw it, I was like, wait, whoa, stop. But like, don't do that. But is that something that you're comfortable with? Like, it's like, really?
So this is like the peeling back the curtain type thing. I think it was my second indie show ever my mom went to, and I ended up getting shoved by a wrestler, and she freaked out, and she's like, how dare he do that? I'm like, mom, we talked about this, it's fine. we had this, I actually proposed it. Like, I thought I would, like, because he was a big heel and he was trying to heat, and I'm like, no, just push me, it's fine, I'm over, it's great. And like, to tell her, oh, it's predetermined, we talk about it ahead of time. Like, anytime I'm in the ring and something happens to me, it's because I've talked with my coworkers ahead of time about it. Consent is super important to me. It's not just something we talk about in sex. I think it's something that we talk about in everything physical in our lives. Like, I don't want to do something in the ring I'm not comfortable with, because ultimately, one, my safety is important, but two, also, like, I want it to come off as authentic. And if I don't believe in what's happening, then that's what's going to happen. Now, from a storyline perspective, if you don't want to shove me for the sake of shoving me, like, then what are we doing? It's kind of wasted. So if you have someone like Maxwell Jacob Friedman shoving me, like, you bet your ass I'm going to shove him back. So that's sort of where we end up getting into the weeds a little bit. Like, okay, well, if you shove me, now you're changing your story a little bit, because I'm not going to, like, just sit back and take it, dude. Like, this is who Aubrey is. So I think that's the important thing. And it's hard a lot because fans, I think in 2021, know the predetermined nature of wrestling, but at the end of the day, we know we're doing a good job if, say, you have that reaction where you see someone shove me and you're just like, and then you get mad, because that means we're doing our job.
Yeah, definitely. It's so funny you brought up MJF, because that was the person who I saw do it. And I was just like, wait!
That was a fun one.
Oh God, it sounds so silly, but I was kind of riled up, and I was like, Lord, no.
You weren't the only one. I got a couple texts after that, like, how dare he? And I'm like, guys, it's fine.
Oh, okay. Well, as long as you're okay, with it, that's all that matters. That's all that matters.
Oh yeah, I love everything I get to do, and I'm very appreciative anytime that, like, my coworkers decide, hey, we're gonna put a little spotlight on Aubrey for a second. Just as long as it makes sense for the story. That's ultimately my whole thing. Does it tell the story the wrestlers want to tell? Then yes, let's go for it.
Okay, great. So what matches would you say are the hardest to sort of keep up with as an authority figure? Like, what's the most hectic match you've ever done?
The most hectic match I've ever done was Blood and Guts in May of, I think, 2021. It was 2 cages, 2 rings, and we weren't in the ring. It was me and Bryce Remsburg, and he ended up getting taken out by Tully Blanchard, so the later half of the match was just me. But part of the ref's role is not just, being the authority figure and trying to enforce rules, but something like that, there's a match that doesn't have rules, yet I'm telling you the story about how it's like the most difficult match I've ever done, and it's because I'm trying to yell production cues to people 20 feet across the ring while trying to not have camera hear me and, you know, tell everyone, hey, we have 5 minutes until the next commercial, to a million people at home watching. It's incredibly difficult and stressful because we have the confines of a television show and we're trying to work within the space that TNT gives us. And that's part of why I love being a ref, is it kind of breeds into everything I gained from my project management experience in games. Is that we're all trying to help each other make a good product. And part of that is me making sure that the guys and gals know all the information they need to get their match done in the amount of time that we have. Because 10 o'clock rolls around and we got to be off the air. So let's do what we can with the time we have. So that one was easily the most stressful match I've ever done, just because there's a lot of running when you have two 20 by 20 cages. That you have to run around, and 10 people all at the same time. It's a lot. It's a lot.
Right, but I'm more than sure that you handled yourself, you know, in a great way, though.
It was a lot of just heavy breathing.
Yeah, definitely. You have to heavy breathe sometimes to get through the stressful moments. You have to do that. But I'm more than sure that you held everything together and all the trains ran on time and everything. So yeah.
We made it.
Yes. You made it through. Definitely. That's all that matters. So what does it mean to you to be a part of the show that you mentioned that's going to be taking place in Alabama, the Belladonna Division show, Coronation, because you're also going to be teaching a seminar and you're going to be a part of the show, and I'm really excited because I'm going to be calling the action as well. So how does it feel to be a part of something, you know, like this, an all-female show down here in Alabama?
I've always been a feminist, and I always love giving women the opportunities that I feel like when they earn it, we give them the opportunities that they've earned. And having something like this where it's an all-woman show where we highlight the beauty of women's wrestling and all these women that, and I've looked at the card, there's some great names on here, but all these women who have kicked ass and worked hard, and they're getting this great platform to talk about. And I'd be remiss to say that, like, I'm honored that someone reached out to me and thought that I should be a part of this, because that's a really big deal. That how often does a referee ever get like flown out somewhere to an indie? Like, that just doesn't happen. We're not wrestlers. That's not really, I think it happened once before I ever got hired at AEW. So I'm already honored by that fact. On top of that, one of my favorite referees, Becky Phillips, is also going to be reffing on the show. Her and I did an NXT tryout together, and she is just absolutely incredible. And so I think this is the first time I'll get to see her since we did that tryout together. So it's a little reunion. I'm the skipper to her Barbie, so people are gonna not know what to expect when we're in a room together, because we get kind of wild.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I love Becky as well. Like, she was so sweet when I met her the first show that we did, and I'm really happy that you are honored to be a part of it. I'm honored to be a part of it as well, in a small way, because it would just be my third time commentating, but I am just really excited to be a part of it in any way, shape, or form, especially since it's in my home state. So I'm just really pumped for it, and I can't wait to see you and talk and basically call your action and everything. Like, it's gonna be cool, and I'm so happy. We're gonna be happy.
I'm just excited to give you a hug because I love everything that you're doing here, and I'm a big hugger. So.
Oh, me too. Oh my gosh, it's gonna be a hug fest. I can't wait. Oh God. Okay, I'm getting too excited. Let me chill. So what are your hobbies outside of wrestling and even outside of podcasting? Like, what are things that you like to do? Like, are you watching any TV shows, or do you read? Like, what are some cool things that you like to do outside of wrestling?
So this is a fun story. Before I was a full-time referee, like, reffing was my hobby, I would say, and then that became my job, and I was like, okay, well, I'll make games on the side, and that'll be my hobby, and then that became my job. So for a while, I didn't have any hobbies, and I'm a bit of a workaholic, and by a bit, I mean a lot. So I have a very hard time taking time for myself and doing things that aren't work related. So I have personally trying to get better at having hobbies. And I think the biggest thing I've realized recently is that I really enjoy cooking. And that's been a big thing. I'm a vegan. I don't drink. but I love food and I love mixology. So finding ways to make cool things that taste good following those restrictions has been super fascinating, especially because I'm a scientist at the end of the day and I love the chemistry aspect of food. So I would say that's really like the big thing. Plus it helps because then I can meal prep for the road and save some money and all that fun stuff. TV shows, I'm always very behind on TV shows. People are watching stuff and I'm like 5 years behind. I recently started watching Letterkenny, which I appreciate so much after having done so many indies in Canada. The humor of that show just speaks to me on a different level, and I absolutely love it. And I know they have a live touring group too, so I'm hoping that eventually I can end up seeing one of their shows. But yeah, cooking and Canadian comedies.
Okay, that's cool. I know in terms of me cooking, like, that's something I should do more often. You know, I can make snacks and make lunches, but as far as like making a full-on dinner, I can't do as of yet without assistance. But I totally get that cooking can be, you know, a little bit of a relaxing thing for people. So yeah, it can be therapeutic for people and stuff. So it's just, so I think that that's really interesting that you know, love cooking in that way, and you'll never go hungry. So that's great. Exactly. Definitely. So what is it like to co-host a podcast that's called AEW Unrestricted with Tony Schiavone, who's basically like an icon in the wrestling voice business? Like, what is that like?
So this is really funny because I had mentioned that like I never watched wrestling as a kid. The thing that got me into it was CM Punk. So Tony Schiavone is like everyone's wrestling dad, where like he is the voice of their childhood type thing. And to me, Tony Schiavone was just a guy that we hired to do commentary. So I didn't have that like attachment to him that everyone else did. So it's been very interesting to see who Tony Schiavone is to my coworkers who come in and they're just like, oh my God, Tony Schiavone's calling me that. I'm like, dude, it's just Schiavone. Like, whatever. He's just a guy. And I just bust his balls all the time. But it's been really great because he has this breadth of knowledge and experience for co-hosting and talking and just like getting information out of people and making them feel comfortable. So I feel that as someone who had very minimal podcast hosting experience going into that, I feel like I've been able to actually carry my own. We've done 2 episodes where I had to host and like interview Tony in a way, and that's far less terrifying of a concept now than it once was, because I kind of know the ins and outs of what to expect when you have a guest on what it is you're trying to do and how you're trying to approach like an interview, what questions you want to have, what preparation you want to do ahead of time when something kind of goes off the rails and you want to follow that thread a little bit. Like, I've learned a lot from him, I think, just organically working and being a part of the podcast with him. Also, he gives the best hugs. Like, that is not something that is well known, and I'm going to actively try to make sure people know that Tony Schiavone gives the best hugs.
Oh, that's so sweet. And it's just, you know, I love how you just kind of, you know, saw him as, yeah, that's just Tony Schiavone, and that's just it. And everybody else is just like, ah, you know. But it's so funny you mentioned about how, you know, you really didn't have that much experience, you know, with podcasting either. We have weird things in common, and that's cool, because when I started my podcast last year, I had never done it before either. I had only listened, you know, to podcasts and stuff like that, and I just needed a place to put all my thoughts about wrestling, you know, out there. So I guess, and podcasting was just a way to do it. So I was just like, okay, well, I'm going to talk about this here, and it just so happened to grow into what it is. And, you know, in your case, you're co-hosting with a person. A lot of my colleagues, you know, co-host with 1 or 2 people or 4 people or even 5 people sometimes. It's just me. Like, my show is literally just me. And so anytime I have a guest, I am very excited to have a guest. Because sometimes when I'm recording, I feel like I'm talking to myself. But but it's not, you know, from a crazy way. But at the same time,
it's not just you.
Yeah, but at the same time, you know, it's still cool in the sense that it's, you know, it's a way for you to get your thoughts out and a way for you to work with others, and a great way to communicate and help, you know, teach people about some things. So I'm sure, you know, like, it's a really cool experience. Like, it's a great experience. Like, I love it. I love podcasting. And hopefully in some way, shape, or form, I can continue it. even as I continue to matriculate and grow in wrestling. And it's good that you're able to do it too, so people won't just think, oh, you're just the referee. No, like, you're a person who can share her thoughts, about wrestling as well, and hang tough with the best of them. So that's really cool that you're able to do all of that as well. So two more questions. One question I have is, who are your top 5 wrestlers of all time? They can be male, female, or non-binary.
My favorite wrestler of all time, funny, like we talked about the CM Punk story early on, my favorite wrestler of all time is Bryan Danielson.
Oh, yes.
There's actually this amazing gif. If you Google Daniel Bryan crying girl, there's a picture of a girl in the front row, Raw, crying in his retirement, and that's me. So to come full circle and now ref his matches is kind of insane. I put Rey Fenix in that category because I think he's this generation's Rey Mysterio, but in kind of a weird way, very different, because every time I see his matches, I see him do something different. And he has an incredible way to get empathy from the audience while still having the restriction of a mask, which is incredibly difficult if you think about the mechanics of it. So yeah, it's crazy. Serena Deeb, I think, is one of the greatest wrestlers today, not just women's wrestlers. She has a fantastic mind for wrestling. Every little detail she thinks of is fantastic. She's also just a kind and positive person. Let me just completely kill her heel gimmick right now, but like, she's just one of the sweetest human beings in the world, and she's so just kind and generous and amazing. So yeah, this is 3. CM Punk, I think what he's done for wrestling has been great, but I think what he's doing for wrestling now is going to be remembered quite a bit because he's working with our younger talent and helping build them up as stars, and that's a very selfless thing to do. So I think, he's having great matches just like he did before, but the fact that he's been away from it for so long, but he's also having matches with guys that, in the future are going to be the faces of AEW, I think that says a lot. Who else? I really think I'll put Sonny Kiss in this conversation as well, because Sonny Kiss has done so much for gender representation, being a non-binary individual, but also being authentically herself. And just her style is so different. It's very rhythmic, gymnastic, dancery, but also you get like the little bits of Sonny in there, like with a twerk every now and then thrown in. But yes, Sonny will also punch you in the face so hard that you're just like, oh my god, and you're knocked on your ass. So I think having that juxtaposition of like a beautiful badass, as she, calls herself, I think is great. I think what she's doing now is doing a lot to change how people view wrestling.
Yeah, that's a pretty solid list. And when I was researching you, I did find that picture of you crying over Bryan Danielson, and that sort of speaks to where he was and basically still is in our hearts. Like, when he retired, a lot of people's hearts were broken. Like, I was just absolutely floored, and I was watching wrestling in and out because I was in school at the time, but when he retired, I was like, are you kidding me? No. But just
we were also surprised because the news broke that day.
Yeah, but just to see him rise again, and wrestle again, it's just fantastic. And even in the case of CM Punk, and seeing him back in wrestling, that's amazing too. Sometimes I still watch his return for Clear Skin. That was just one of the coolest moments this year. I'm probably going to talk more about it when I do my year-end episode. But that was one of the coolest moments this year, ever. I just never thought that would happen. And just the fact that he's here and he's helping, the future. That's just amazing. And I'm just really pumped about that. And definitely Sonny Kiss, what she's able to do, for representation and her ability. I feel like the sky's the limit for her. So you have a really solid list there, and definitely with Rey Fenix too.
Disclaimer: it's all my coworkers, but
it's okay though. It's okay though. If that's yours, then that's yours. Okay.
I have a strong bias.
but if it's your list, it's your list. It's okay. If you work with them, that is just fine. So, what would you say the future holds for you, Aubrey?
I have no idea. 5 years ago, I had never stepped in a wrestling ring, so to think of like where we could be 5 years from now is absolutely insane. I know that what I want to do is continue to have a positive impact on.
Having game night with your besties? Dinner is done and you forgot the wine. Binge watching another one of your favorite TV shows, or maybe the big game just went to overtime. No matter your reasons for wanting to stay put, keep your feet up and get beer, wine, and spirits delivered to you in under 60 minutes with Drizzly. And don't forget promo code FAST5 for $5 off that first order.
Wait. So hypothetically speaking, let's say all my pants are in the wash and I'm currently indisposed.
Not sure where you came from, Chris, but yes, Drizzly.com still has you covered.
Oh, okay, cool. But what if I just got done swimming and I got to wait 30 minutes?
Drizzly, that's not a thing, but Drizzly.com.
Okay, cool. Just one more. So somebody just put a banana in my tailpipe, so I can't really...
DRIZLY.com.
So you're telling me all I need to do is download the Drizzly app or go to Drizzly.com, and I'm going to save $5 off my first order with the promo code FAST5?
The convenience of home delivery in under 60 minutes, the benefits of getting it when you need it, what you want, and great value on a huge selection.
Man, I'm in there like swimwear, which is what I'm currently wearing because my pants are...
Yeah, we know.
So download the Drizzly app or go to Drizzly.com.
That's DRIZLY.com.
And be sure to type in the promo code FAST5 to save $5 off your first delivery. That's Drizzly.com.
It used to be hard to find the exact auto parts you needed, and that meant spending a lot of time at swap meets. It's a different game now when you can order exactly what you need from eBay Motors. They have 122 million parts, so you can always find the right fitment. Spend less time searching and more time building with the eBay Motors app or visit ebaymotors.com. Let's ride.
Wrestling. One of the things that I actively do, like you mentioned briefly that like I'm teaching a seminar when I come out to Alabama for this the Belladonna Division show, and it's I want to share the knowledge that I have. I want to share the experiences I've had, and I want to do what I can to show people that if you want to do something and you put in the work and the right opportunity comes along, you can totally pull it off. I mean, eventually I want to ref the main event of a show where we're in a giant sold out football stadium. Like from a like actual ref standpoint, like I think that's like the big goal that I want to hit. I have no idea when that's going to happen, but AEW has been kind of strapped to a rocket, so who knows? It might be sooner than I think.
Yeah, definitely. Like AEW is growing, and the more it grows, you never know where exactly it'll go. You may be able to do that someday, but you'll definitely be to work for it, and it's definitely like in the cards for you. I totally see it. So I'm really excited about your future. I'm excited to work with you in January. Like January is really coming up. Oh my God. But yeah. Yeah, like it's crazy, but I'm really excited to work with you in the future, and I can't wait to see what else you've got going on. Well, thank you, Aubrey, for coming on the Hardy Wrestling Podcast. And
thank you so much for having me. This was wonderful.
Yeah, this was really great. And if you could tell the people where they can find you and follow you, and put yourself over and tell them what you got going on, you can do that now.
You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at RefAubrey. You can check out all the stuff that AEW Games is working on. I'm overseeing game development projects over there. We've got some cool stuff happening on Twitch currently, so check it out at AEW Games on Twitter. You can also listen to the AEW Unrestricted podcast, new audio episodes every Thursday, and the YouTube videos come out on Mondays.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the Hardy Wrestling Podcast, and I hope to see you again on here soon. You can come back if you ever want to.
We'll have to make it happen one day.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so here in this segment where I would normally do my weekly recap, I'm just going to do a yearly recap of my favorite moments in wrestling this year. Since the year is getting ready to wrap up, literally, like next week is going to be Christmas, and then after that, we'll be finished with 2021, y'all. It's been crazy. Like this year has been busy and crazy, but it's been a busy, crazy way in a good way in wrestling. Like it's just been so much going on, and it's been good. Like I can't really wait to just get into it because it's been a lot of stuff personally that was good that happened to me that had to do with wrestling, but then also that stuff that didn't have anything to do with me as well, that was good too. So in terms of my favorite moments in wrestling this year, one of them has to be the crowds being able to come back. Now, of course, I was going to watch wrestling regardless of what the pandemic was going to do, because wrestling is my life, right? But the crowds being gone was just kind of sad, because, there's a part of the wrestling experience that really isn't as complete without the fans being there. And when I watched that first episode of SmackDown where the fans came back and they welcomed them back and everything, it was really cool. And even before that, when the fans were at WrestleMania for both nights this year, that was cool too, because it was just really missing something. And so to see people back at wrestling shows, that really meant a lot to me. It was like a part of my soul was just complete from seeing people at wrestling shows. And then of course they were slowly, getting back into the swing of things by going to different cities and stuff. And a part of me was wondering when they was going to come to my city, but our arena, the BJCC, was under construction and remodeling and stuff like that, and it's finally finished. And of course they announced that we're going to have our SmackDown show, because Birmingham is a SmackDown town, in March of next year, and I'm really excited about that. So to be a part of the crowd, that experience, it's like bar none one of the most amazing experiences of your life, because you're really surrounded by people, who love wrestling and are passionate about it just as much as you are. And then you make friends, and then you meet wrestlers outside and stuff like that. Like, that's gonna be amazing. So the idea that a lot of people were able to come back to shows and have those experiences and stuff like that, that warms my heart. It was really good to see that this year. So, and hopefully, we can stay open, because this Omicron thing is trying to pop off and start some mess. But here's hoping that we can still, gather and act like we have some sense, even though Omicron is trying to pop off. So crowds coming back was one of my favorite moments in wrestling this year. And of course, the further dominance of the New Day was two of my favorite moments this year, in the form of Big E winning the Money in the Bank briefcase earlier. Like, I was so excited to see him win the Money in the Bank briefcase. Like, there were so many people it could have gone to. It almost looked like Seth Rollins was gonna win it again, or maybe Drew McIntyre could try and win it or something like that. Or I was really pushing maybe for Cesaro to win it, to sort of revamp that little bit of a push that he had, earlier in the year. But nope, it was Big E's time, and it was really good that was able to happen to him, simply because, he had been positioned to be at the top ever since they separated him from the New Day. Of course, he's not out of the group as a whole, but they separated, the members, so Kofi and Xavier could operate more as a tag team, and Big E could be more so on his own as a solo heavyweight star. And he won the Intercontinental Championship back, and then he lost it at WrestleMania and everything to Apollo Crews. But a part of me was wondering, how is he gonna bounce back from this? And he bounced back from it in a cool way. He wound up winning Money in the Bank, and then, much to the chagrin of so many people who were trying to underestimate him because he's goofy, he wound up cashing in Money in the Bank on Bobby Lashley to win the title. Oh my God, on Monday Night Raw too. Words cannot express how happy I was for him. I did post a video of me reacting to him winning, and I was just celebrating all that week, because I was just so happy for him that he had worked up to that moment. Because I remember when he used to be Dolph Ziggler's, right-hand man with AJ Lee and stuff, and he used to guard Dolph Ziggler when he was Mr. Money in the Bank. And now, to make it full circle, he was Money in the Bank, and he cashed in successfully and had his moment on Raw, and it was absolutely wonderful. And then to see Kofi and Xavier come out and celebrate with him as they do as brothers, it was just so beautiful. And then throughout the week, everybody was celebrating with him too. Even WWE changed their Twitter title on Twitter to say Big E is WWE champion in all caps. That was just absolutely beautiful. I was so happy for Big E, and continue to be supportive of him as well as a babyface champion. He is my love. I love him. So there's nothing that he can't do. And even with him being champion, he's gotten so many opportunities to be a hype man at football games for Iowa, where he went to school, and actually be an announcing hype man for different boxing matches and stuff like that. Like, he is making the best of the situation, and I'm so happy for him. And also, in terms of the New Day, you had Xavier Woods winning King of the Ring, which was something that he always wanted since he was a child. Like, this man can do everything under the sun. He can host game shows. He has his own channel, Up, Down now. Like, there isn't anything that this man can't do. And so, and he always dreamed to be King of the Ring. Like, a lot of people get into wrestling to be the WWE champion or whatnot or whatever. He didn't want that. He just wanted to be King of the Ring. And when he got placed in the tournament and kept, vying for it and everything, he fought everybody, even people who you wouldn't necessarily expect him to win against, like Finn Balor and stuff. Like, he was able to show more of what he had to offer as an athlete, because a lot of people think of him as the mouthpiece and don't really give him a lot of credit in terms of his in-ring work. He is really a solid athlete in that ring. And so to see him go on to face all the people he faced and to win the tournament at Crown Jewel meant the world to me. And it also meant the world to me too, because he is my birthday twin and I love him so very much. So congratulations to Xavier for being King of the Ring. Even though he had to deal with some disrespect from the Usos crushing his crown and all the other stuff, he has a new crown and it's cooler. So it was beautiful, and I'm just really happy for him. And the New Day has now fully solidified themselves as the greatest faction of all time. If you want to fight me, we can fight about it, but just know I'm not going to change my mind. The New Day is the greatest faction in the entire history of time. Argue with your mama. Don't argue with me. So, also one of my favorite moments this year was Zelina Vega returning to WWE, because I loved her so very much. Y'all, if you've listened to the Hardy Wrestling Podcast, I've told the story as to how when I met her at NXT 4 years ago, and she actually, I didn't meet her, but she was making her entrance with Andrade, who was NXT champion at the time, and I screamed out, "I love you, Zelina," to her, and she winked at me, and so I've loved her ever since. But actually, I've loved her before that, because I loved how she would, interfere on Andrade's behalf, because she has, a past history as a tag team wrestler and stuff like that, and just seeing her and how she's grown, to follow her dreams, and also doing it in memory of her father who passed away in 9/11. Like, just her story as a whole is just so inspiring. So I've just always loved her. So to see her return to WWE after months of speculation, and then what's so stupid is she returned on a SmackDown that I wasn't watching because I was out of town with my best friends. And I saw it on Twitter and I lost my mind, and my friends were like, "What's going on?" And I was just like, "This girl wrestler that I love came back," and they didn't know what was going on. It's so funny. Shout out to Felicia and Tashina, like, and Cinnamon too. Like, whenever I be talking about wrestling, they just listen to me talk about it because they know I'm passionate, but they really don't be knowing what's going on. But it's okay though, they support me, and that's all that matters. I love y'all. But Zelina returning just made me so glad, because I just love her style and I just love everything about her. And then it was cool to see everybody, including myself, rally for her to get more time on television, especially after that SmackDown that came before the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. And she was in New York, and she was in a tag team match, and that match got cut for time. And a lot of people were upset about that. And she saw that, and she posted what her outfit was going to look like and everything, but she wound up bouncing back from that by being a part of the first ever Queen's Crown tournament, which was the equivalent to the King of the Ring tournament. And even though that was, controversial in and of itself, because those matches didn't get the same time limits as the King of the Ring matches that would go on for, say, maybe 10 to 15 minutes at a time, whereas the Queen of the Ring matches wound up going like less than a minute or maybe less than 2 minutes. She still made the best of a crazy situation and won that entire tournament and even beat Doudrop. Like, Doudrop is a force, right? So I didn't expect her to beat her, but she actually won and became the first ever Queen's Crown winner. So now she's the Queen of the Ring, and she's taken that character to great heights. Like, she's being the obnoxious royal type who will speak with an accent like, I'm royalty and all this other stuff, but when she gets mad at that crowd, she goes back to her Queen's accent her Queen's New York accent, and then starts cussing you out in Spanish and all this other stuff. So I just love it, and I just love what she represents, you know, for Puerto Rican representation and everything. Like, I love Zelina Vega. I'm so happy she's returned, and I'm happy that she's Queen of the Ring and now women's tag team champion with Carmella. Like, that's just cool. So yeah, I love that. And another part of wrestling that I really loved was NWA Empower. Oh my god, that makes me emotional kind of just thinking about it, because of the fact that I was there that weekend on a wing and a prayer and I just, you know, decided to go to be a media correspondent for Women's Wrestling Talk with TK Trinidad. Shout out to her, because she has been a huge blessing to me this year. She was my first guest on during season 3 of the Hardy Wrestling Podcast, and just everything that she has done to help me grow as a media person, as a wrestling media person, like, I'm just really grateful for. And just the idea, you know, that, you know, she was able to help me, you know, as I was matriculating through that weekend, never having done a red carpet before, never having, you know, interviewed wrestlers like face to face like that before. She was just really helpful with that. And just being there to experience that all-female wrestling event that was produced by Mickie James, who truly believed that an all-female wrestling event should have happened, you know, again after WWE Evolution, even after she was told that women's wrestling wouldn't sell. Like, that weekend just felt like, that entire pay-per-view event just felt like empowerment was just in the room. Like, love was in the room, passion was in the room, like, girl power was in the room. And I was just really honored to be there at that event, to watch the wrestling that I watched, like with Camille fighting legit Layla Hirsch for the NWA World's Women's title, aka the Burke, to watch women like the Hex, Marty Bell and Allison Kay, win those tag team titles, and actually interview them and meet them. Like, that meant the world to me, because I actually saw them in the Mae Young Classic, like, so long ago. Like, that was just really amazing for me to meet them and to interview and to meet Kiara Hogan, who's rising, you know, in her right and stuff like that. Like, and to interview Awesome Kong, like, that was just, and to meet Mickie James and interview her for Women's Wrestling Talk. Like, that was just the most amazing weekend of my life, and it sort of just let me know, you know, what's possible, and, you know, what can happen when you just continue to live your dreams and never give up on a vision, and you see it through to the very end. Like, just being there with all those women, you know, interviewing all those women, seeing them in action, seeing them produce, meeting other, you know, media personalities in wrestling, like Phil Lindsay, who was there. Shout out to him. He was also a guest on the Hardy Wrestling Podcast. And meeting Ella J and Samira for the first time, and seeing them in action, and meeting DS Shin and everyone else. Like, it was just really cool, and I will treasure that weekend for the rest of my life. Like, that weekend lives rent free in my head forever. Like, the connections I made, like, it was just really good, and I'll never forget that. And also, tying into that, another great part of this year was watching Impact do their pay-per-view called Knockouts Knockdown, yet another all-female pay-per-view. WWE really needs to catch up and do another all-female pay-per-view. They really do, because everybody else is just outrunning them. Like, it was just great. Like, seeing Impact's Knockouts Knockdown, watching that, you know, after I came home from Comic-Con, and doing a wrestling panel with Burma Slam and Mike Lucid, like, that was so cool. And actually meeting other wrestling fans and other fans of different fandoms and stuff, who just so happen to also be wrestling fans too, that was really cool. And meeting Dr. Britt Baker, DMD, and Booker T and saying hey to Sting, and he waved back at me. Like, that was really cool. Like, that was just amazing. Like, when watching Impact's Knockouts Knockdown was cool too. Like, they showed the induction of Awesome Kong into the Impact Hall of Fame. They paid the entire show, they paid tribute to Daphne, who we sadly lost this year. There was just so much that happened. Mercedes Martinez won the Knockouts Knockdown tournament in order to challenge for the Knockouts championship, and she would ultimately lose, but at the same time it was still good to see her, you know, solidify herself as a singles competitor in a new way after having been let go by WWE. That was amazing. Another great part of wrestling this year was watching the rise of Bianca Belair. And I know I've talked about it ad nauseum on this show. Like, if you listen to me, you know, episodically, I've done so many segments about the greatness of Bianca Belair, who she is, what she stands for, all of the above. But watching her rise earlier this year has just been one of the greatest honors of my life. It's something that I wish probably would have happened when I was a child, but even still being 28 years old and watching it and still being kind of like a kidult trying to figure everything out, it was still good to see, because you see this woman who worked so hard to be a wrestler even after this really wasn't her dream, and then wind up falling in love with it and getting better and better at it as an athlete, you know, after having done everything that she's done in CrossFit, volleyball, running track, all of the above. Like, just seeing her rise to the top of the occasion, win the Royal Rumble, becoming the second black person to ever do so and the first black woman to ever win the Women's Royal Rumble, and choosing to face Sasha Banks, making that the first time that two black women would ever main event a WrestleMania. That wasn't even the main event at first, but we pushed for it online and it became the main event of night one of WrestleMania. And just seeing that history be made, and just watching that match over and over and over and over again, like I have, it just gives me clear skin just thinking about it. Like, when I just think about the magic that they put forth, it was just so wonderful. And just to watch Bianca win that title in front of her family, her mom, her dad, her brother, her husband, who was just so supportive of her and everything, it was just so beautiful. And just to see the attention that it garnered, like, that match won an ESPY. Like, it's so funny because when Becky Lynch came back and won the title in the most controversial and horrible way possible, that broke all of our hearts from Bianca, she was talking about what her main event did, you know, when she faced off against Ronda Rousey and Charlotte Flair. And in my head, I just feel like, you know, Becky, your main event may have been the first all-female main event, but let's be real, like, yours didn't have half as much as attention as Bianca's and Sasha's. Like, Bianca and Sasha were both labeled like the top 5 athletes that were searched on Twitter this year because of that match. Bianca and Sasha actually won an ESPY because of that match. Like, Becky's main event was nominated for an ESPY, but it didn't win. Bianca and Sasha's won that ESPY. They won Best WWE Moment. So, I mean, there's just so much attention that was given to them and Bianca because of that. So it's just like, when you think about, like, if you had to weigh which one, you know, actually meant the most to the public, it's definitely Bianca and Sasha. And just Bianca being able to be a dominant champion and win against the likes of Bayley and beat Bayley in Hell in a Cell, beat Carmella multiple times, including in a new crowd at Rolling Loud. Like, WWE had never even done Rolling Loud before. She did that. It's just like, Bianca has been able to just accomplish so much, taking pictures with Megan Thee Stallion, like, be on Hot 97, and even with Big E, like, going back to Big E, he was on The Breakfast Club for the first time. Like, wrestling is becoming more and more mainstream in terms of the black culture, and a huge part of that goes to Bianca Belair and her rise. And yeah, she's not champion now, even though I really felt like she should have won the Raw Women's Championship, you know, from Becky, but Miss Becky, ma'am, wants to cheat, so whatever. Bianca is still dominant, and she's still a star regardless of a title. She's still the EST regardless of a title, because being the EST is a mindset that's not just predicated on how many trophies or titles you win. That's predicated on who you think you are, and that's what's so beautiful about her. So yeah, I'm just excited to see Bianca rise even further within the next, couple of years, and hopefully she'll be champion again, and that we won't have to wait umpteen years for that to happen. So yeah, another favorite part of wrestling this year definitely has to be Roman Reigns' run from 2020 all the way up until now. He's just been a hot mess, not in a bad way, but in a good way, a hot mess, heel, just basically telling everybody what to do, bum rushing over his cousins and everything, bullying Paul Heyman, into being his wise man, even though he just fired him yesterday and stuff like that. Roman Reigns really has, done an amazing turnaround in his career since coming back from his cancer diagnosis and stuff like that. Him turning heel was probably one of the best things to ever happen for him in his career. And Paul Heyman being next to him was definitely an amazing part of his career as well. And I'm sad to see that partnership go. But Paul Heyman and Brock Lesnar are just meant to be. So maybe they'll get back together and then this will be a huge part of day one. But their entire run, Roman Reigns' entire run as champion, and just, smashing them, stacking them, and being a needle mover, and, being a part of the bloodline with the Usos and stuff like that has just been amazing stuff. And he deserves, a lot of credit, for carrying that and carrying SmackDown for so long. That was just really cool. And then also with Paul Heyman's turning point with Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar, this was also a star-making turn for Kayla Braxton as well, because something that they have been alluding to on Talking Smack a whole lot was the beef between Paul Heyman and Kayla Braxton, and how he would always have something snide to say to her and stuff like that. And it's just it was just so funny to watch him sort of undermine her work as a journalist. But she was the one who was able to actually break the news that Brock Lesnar's suspension was lifted, and Paul Heyman was looking all kinds of scared. And just to be able to see, a journalist be able to being able to help carry a story like that, that was something that we really hadn't seen in a long time. And I thought that was really unique and cool and special. And I just think that was really cool for Kayla Braxton to be able to do that. And I just love her because she's from Alabama, and just everything that she's done in her career. I just love Kayla. Shout out to you. Us Bama girls got to stick together. So that was just really cool. Also, it was cool to see Aja Smith on the main roster, as well as doing her NXT stuff as well. So, that was just really awesome. And just on top of that, this is just going to be part one of what I enjoyed in wrestling this year. And I'm actually going to start with part two as well. So I'm just going to end this right here, and I'm going to start part two of what I enjoyed in wrestling this year. So stay tuned. Alright, so this is part two of what I enjoyed in wrestling this year. This is a yearly recap. So basically, another thing that I enjoyed in wrestling this year was, I know this is going to be an unpopular opinion for some of y'all, but I enjoyed the fact that Mandy Rose went back to NXT, which is now NXT 2.0. Because there was a lot of mystery surrounding, why she went back. Because, of course, she was in a tag team on Raw with Dana Brooke. And those were, the two strong blondes that really got it going on and stuff like that. That was cool, but it really wasn't giving what they thought it was supposed to give. And Mandy's abilities in the ring were tending to get a little bit sloppy. So for her to go back to NXT and, and polish up her in-ring work, and then become this heel that was sort of walking backstage and sort of watching people in the women's division, and then going on to recruit JC Jane and Gigi Dolan and create a faction known as Toxic Attraction was really interesting. And then on top of that, to not only just be, Toxic Attraction and for them to be a talented faction, it's for them to go on and win the women's tag team championships. And then for Mandy to be able to usher in this new era of NXT and become and hold her first championship ever, being the NXT Women's Champion, even though of course she had help due to Dakota Kai interfering, you know, to get inside the head of Raquel Gonzalez. Like, I really enjoy the fact that we have a female faction that's being that dominant, because we saw a lot of it in NXT with the Undisputed Era, you know, holding all the gold, right? And that was really cool, because I know in the modern era, like, it sort of almost puts you in the minds of Evolution and how they had all the titles at one point, outside of Ric Flair. But then again, he's Ric Flair. He didn't really need all those titles back then. But at the same time, it kind of puts you in the mind of that. So to see a dominant faction like that do that, especially a dominant female faction do that, that was really cool. And they just embody a whole lot of course they do embody sex appeal, but the thing is, when they get in that ring, it's not like they wrestle, you know, bad or anything. Like, they still have that athleticism, that raw talent that's still there. So it kind of disheartens me when people just sort of try to relegate them to just, you know, hot pieces of, you know, booty and boobs and stuff like that, when there's so much more that they have to offer as, you know, talented wrestlers. I mean, yeah, they look good, but they also wrestle good as well. So I feel like we shouldn't, you know, just underestimate Toxic Attraction simply because they have, you know, these outside, you know, va-va-voom type looks. Like, yeah, like that was definitely a favorite part for me this year. And just seeing Mandy Rose rise and be NXT champion, like, that's just pretty cool to me too. So yeah, I know that's probably unpopular, but you know, I'm nothing if I'm not an original thinker. So there we go. Something else that I really loved about wrestling this year was the return of CM Punk. And I know Aubrey and I were talking about CM Punk and stuff like that in our interview that you just heard. But CM Punk returning to wrestling was just something I never thought would ever happen, like, ever. And a lot of people, of course, were, you know, waxing poetic about it online, saying, oh, he's going to come back, and oh, he's giving cryptic messages and stuff like that. But you just never know in wrestling. Like, for all you know, something could happen, and then you could hear something, and then it winds up not happening. Or it winds up happening, and it winds up not being what you expect, or something like that. But when CM Punk came back, I remember I was sitting in the living room, watching it with my dad, and it came on, and I just remember people just going crazy on social media, and I was like, Dad, turn on Rampage. And he turned on Rampage, and CM Punk was slowly walking to the ring, and I just remember just glaring at the TV, just shocked. Like, the wrestling landscape was changing in a way that I just didn't think would happen, because I just never thought CM Punk would ever come back to wrestling. And once he did, you know, and just watching him soak in that moment and watch all those people in Chicago, his hometown, soak in that moment and scream and cry. I'm not laughing at old dude who was crying. I thought that was wonderful, and it was very, you know, a raw feeling, you know, like, it was just really good. And to see all those people with their shirts on, to see that one girl who was jumping up and down because he was there, like, that was just amazing. And just hearing him make his speech about being back, about putting over the younger guys and who have the passion that he had years ago and stuff like that. Like, it was just good to see him in a happy place to actually return to wrestling, because wrestling, you know, was something that of course he loved, but then of course once he went to WWE, there was a lot of good stuff that happened for him, but then there was a lot of bad stuff too. And it's just, you just kind of thought that he was finished after he left WWE, but he wasn't, you know. And then he did the UFC, and at least he tried that, even though it may not have worked out as well, he still very much tried. So it's just like you have him, you know, pursuing other passions, like with comic books and movies and stuff like that. So now he's back in wrestling, and it's just amazing to see him. And also shout out to him wearing that pro-choice t-shirt in Texas. Like, that was just so cool. Like, literally, like, if you don't, this isn't a political podcast by any means, but I do believe in a woman's right to choose. It's our body, so back off. So watching CM Punk do that and fight with the best of the best in AEW, like, that's just really cool, and I'm just really happy to see him. Also, to be able to see his wife AJ Lee, you know, step back into wrestling as a producer / commentator for WoW Superheroes, which is set to come back. Like, that's really cool too, even though there was a lot of controversy with Tessa Blanchard being the face of the company in light of everything that she had done or been accused of in terms of her racism. Like, outside of that, AJ Lee being back in wrestling is also really cool too. And even though she left wrestling due to injuries and stuff like that, she says, you never know. But she's having fun, watching and signing these other women who are actually the future of women's wrestling. So that was really cool too. So seeing her return to wrestling was great. And seeing her husband, CM Punk, return to wrestling was great too. So here's hoping that whatever they continue to do, they continue to prosper and do good things as well. Also, another funny part of wrestling that I really enjoyed this year was Arn Anderson talking to Cody Rhodes about the Glock and splattering someone's brains. That was a lot, but it was really funny. And I just thought that was really, like, that was just an old head reaction to something bad happening to him. Like, look, if you try to rob me, baby, it's about to be on and popping. Like, I'm not going to sit here and just let you take my stuff. I'm going to hurt you. That was just really funny, okay? Arn Anderson, we give him love all the time. Let's just continue to love on him from the wrestling community because he's one of our OGs, and we need to show love to our OGs more. As long as they don't be like ratchet, problematic people, let's just show love to our OGs, because let's just appreciate them for what they give us now, even continuously as they age, because that was just really, really funny. Like, that's some behavior I expect to hear from my grandparents. Rest in peace to all of them, but seriously, that was the type of time they was on. My grandmamas were country. They would shoot. But anyway, that was just really cool. I also love the rise of Jade Cargill and seeing her continue to find her way as a wrestler. And I'm hoping that she goes on to win the TBS Women's Championship on AEW as well. Like, there's just so much that she has to offer as an athlete, and she's only going to get better from here. So it's really cool watching her rise and also flipping off people who call her matches or the other women's matches on AEW beer breaks and bathroom breaks and stuff like that. And also shout out to her for calling out, wrestling fans who have problems with Black women in wrestling. I know I was taking a break during all of that, but I saw all of that take place. And let me just say that Black women in wrestling deserve as much respect as anybody else, because, we're dominant, we're amazing. We represent, Black women in wrestling represent women who watch the product but aren't necessarily given the best opportunities or the best time or the best credit all the time. And they represent me, they represent all of us. And if you don't respect Black women in wrestling, that just means that you just don't respect Black women, period. And that's just something that you need to have checked yourself. That's a personal problem. You get that fixed. But as far as we're concerned, we're going to continue to take up space regardless of what any bully or any trash person has to say about us. And that's just the truth. Wrestling deserves to reflect the world in which we live. And in the world in which we live, Black women exist and take up space, and we live and we thrive in abundance. So, boom, pow, that's it. So, Jade Cargill is gonna continue to rise, and that's just the meat and potatoes of it, and that's just it. So, also with that, in terms of talking about Black women, just watching the Phoenix rising of Naomi, who really wasn't given a lot to do on Raw, but then was placed on SmackDown, but now has this amazing storyline with Sonya Deville that I did talk about earlier in the show. Like, it's really great to see that she's doing all of this, and there are people rallying behind her, and writing love letters to her. Of course, shout out to the people who shared that Women's Wrestling Talk editorial that was written by one of our girls at Women's Wrestling Talk. Her name is slipping my mind right now, and I'm mad about it. But shout out to her for writing that love letter to Naomi, which she read and saw, because we appreciate and love her so very much, because she's been tenured with the company for a long time. And even though she's only been SmackDown Women's Champion twice, like, we just want better for her, because she is an amazing athlete. Like, she has the attitude, like, she has it all. Like, just give her her things. Give her her things. And I can't wait to see her kick Sonya Deville's behind. Like, I literally cannot wait for that. And there's just so much more that she has to offer. Like, she's always going viral and giving attention to the company. So the company needs to do right by her and do better by her. The same treatment and the same pushing that they give to the types of pushing that they do for Sasha, the types of pushing that they do for Bianca, all of that would not happen if it weren't for the contributions of Naomi. So they need to give Naomi her things, like, now, before she does something and then proceeds to try to get her things from somewhere else. They need to get smart immediately. So watching Naomi rise this year was really great as well. And a couple more things in wrestling that I loved this year was Bad Bunny, and just watching wrestling, you know, sort of tie in with rap in a way that was just really cool, that I actually feel that I sort of spoke into existence a little bit more, and a lot of people kind of saw this as well. You had, of course, Wale still being the ambassador of wrestling and rap, you know, making songs with the Hurt Business and about the Hurt Business and stuff like that. You had West Side Gun giving love to so many wrestlers and actually being featured on NXT television this past week. Like, that was cool. And then you have Bad Bunny, who actually trained for 4 months at the Performance Center so he can be a tag team partner with Damian Priest, a fellow Puerto Rican wrestler. You know, they were both together. They're both from the same town in Puerto Rico. Like, they literally came together and became an amazing tag team at WrestleMania with The Miz and John Morrison. Like, this dude probably had one of the best performances from a celebrity at WrestleMania that I've ever seen. He actually loves wrestling so much that he took it upon himself to do the work to prepare for that moment. And it was so good that I wanted to see him wrestle more and more even after WrestleMania. But, you know, he had to start and do his music career and stuff like that and do a tour and all that. And he's a very prolific musician with his song with Booker T and everything. Like, that was just really cool to see. So I hope at some point Bad Bunny will come back and do more wrestling things, because that was just really cool. And even though there are a lot of people who didn't understand it, I still loved it very much. So, I mean, hey, if Bad Bunny decides he wants to come back to wrestling, let him come back, because he did the doggone thing. Then on top of that, you had Cardi B's hit single Up was the theme song for SummerSlam. Like, that was really cool, even though a lot of people were rumbling on about how she could have a match against Lacey Evans because they got into a little kerfuffle on Twitter and stuff like that. Like, that was awesome for me, because that was two things that I really love: wrestling and rap music and rap personas, you know, coming together, you know, for wrestling. Like, wrestling is a cool thing when you really think about it. So when you combine rap with it too, like the same way they combined rock and wrestling a long time ago, like, that's amazing. Like, the sky's the limit with that. Like, do more with that. And then to see Megan Thee Stallion take a picture with Bianca Bel-Air, like, that was really cool. And they actually showed that on television. And Corey Graves joked on Byron Saxton and asked him if he knew what a bottom feeder was. I was just like, dang. That was just really cool. So, and then you also had Bow Wow and Soulja Boy talking about how they wanted to wrestle or whatever. But they weren't really serious about it. They weren't, because they just weren't. And yeah, it just felt like they was just doing that for clout or whatever. But at the same time, it was still fun to listen to them kind of go back and forth. So that was just really, really amazing. And then to see Bad Bunny perform on SNL with the 24/7 title and do it proudly, like, that was just really cool this year. Like, that was just amazing. So yeah, and hopefully they'll do more of that stuff in 2022, because WWE deserves all of the attention in terms of mainstream wrestling, and all of the attention in terms of rapid wrestling as well. Even AEW, with them having Snoop Dogg and stuff on the show and stuff like that, like they just need more of that. More rap and wrestling needs to be on these wrestling shows. And actually, don't be afraid to go on Impact Wrestling either. Like, do stuff like that. Like, do more of that. That was cool. And then, of course, something else that I found amazing this year was the Pro Wrestling Illustrated's Women's 150 issue, which I was so happy to be able to have bought and read that, and just see Bianca Belair be number one on the 150 list, and actually seeing women that I actually met and interviewed this year on the list. Like, that was the first time that's ever happened to me in my life. Like, women that I've interviewed, like Deanna Purrazzo and Masha Slamovich, like all those women, you know, being on the list, and Thunder Rosa, who I had on the show in the past, like watching those women be on that list and knowing that I've actually, you know, in some way actually talked to them and, you know, help put attention on them in some way, shape, or form, like that was just really cool. And then seeing our article that Ella J wrote about Empower, because we were both there, like being able to read that article, you know, that meant the world to me too. Like just being able to say that you even know people and that you actually met and interviewed people on the women's 150 list, like that's just something I just never thought would happen to me. So that was just really amazing. And then seeing Righteous Reg and reading his article about Jazz, who I actually had the honor and privilege of calling a match for her at the Belladonna show, the first Belladonna division show that I did earlier this year in Gaston, Alabama. Like that was cool too. So shout out to Pro Wrestling Illustrated for an amazing women's 150 magazine that I need to frame somewhere because it's just cool. Like I love it so much. It was really good. And if you haven't read it, please read it. Find it, buy it, read it. It's good. So now to get into the personal parts of wrestling that I really enjoyed this year was making my debut as a commentator with the Belladonna division. Like I found out about this from Miranda Morales, who is one of my good friends in the wrestling podcasting space, and who's also a great ring announcer out in Arizona. And my podcast is also run on her and Greg DeMarco's network called the Chairshot She told me about this opportunity to commentate, and that Casey Dillon was looking for a commentator. And I was just like, well, I've never done it before, but I guess I could try, you know, I guess, because I actually wrote it down in my notebook one day, like maybe I could try commentary or something. And it actually manifested and happened that way. And Casey heard me and heard the podcast and wanted me to do it. And I was just like, oh my God, are you serious? And just learning how to gather information on these female wrestlers, because this is an all-female promotion here in Alabama, and putting all this together and being able to interview, you know, Casey and interview Veronica, who's also a co-owner of the Belladonna division along with Casey, and interviewing women who were a part of the show like The Woad and Valentina Loca, like, and Kaylina Keene, whose third wrestling show was that first show. Like, that was just amazing. And just being in the locker room with these women and talking to them and just, you know, getting their information and making sure I had everything I needed to help, you know, tell their story in the match, like that meant the world to me. Like I had never done anything like that before. And just to be able to do something like that and to make them look good on commentary was just really cool. Like I watched videos of commentary, like studied, you know, the best commentators, you know, tried to find what my voice style was, and I just did my very best. And that's all, I guess that was all I could really ask of myself, to show up and do the very best for that show and for the second show as well. And I had the best partners with me, like Scott Resner, the funeral director. Thank you so much, and I want to have you on the show at some point so we can talk about what that experience was like. Who is a constant commentator, you know, for Spartan Wrestling in Gaston as well. Like, just having him help me throughout all of that, like, that was just really cool. He didn't have to do that, but he did, and that was just amazing. So being a part of that, you know, just meant the world to me. And just watching these women, you know, at the top of their game, you know, who wrestle week in and week out all the time, you know, just, that was just amazing. Like, these are like superheroes, and I'm just the girl who gets to talk about them, and it's just amazing. So that was just really cool. And then doing it for the second show, that was cool. And then hopefully, if everything goes better in my life, I'll come back for the third show and commentate for that. And for the first time, the Belladonna division will be on Fight TV. So that will be really good too. So For the second time, I'll actually be involved with a wrestling program that will be on Fight TV, because I became involved with Women's Wrestling Talk this year as well. And that was amazing too. That feels like I'm in school, because I was actually thinking about going back to school for a communications degree or a journalism degree, for a master's. But joining Women's Wrestling Talk and getting taught by Emily May and TK Trinidad is all the schooling that I would possibly need. And all the women that's on staff, Nikki, Drian, Santana, Katrina, Ayla, like everyone, Ella, Samira, Queen PR of those wrestling girls, like everybody, I've learned so much from them this year. And just being able to meet them and learn from them every single week, you know, has just been one of the greatest blessings of my life. Like, TK didn't have to say yes to me. Like, she didn't have to want me, but she could have said no, because I'm just starting. And it's like, I just started this podcast like last year, and the idea, which is about to be 2 years ago, but the idea that she actually saw something in me and wanted me to be a part of her baby, like, that just continues to mean the world to me. And hopefully, you know, we can continue to grow together, and I can help Women's Wrestling Talk grow, and she can continue to help me grow and stuff like that, and we can help each other grow, and women in wrestling media can continue to get more respect, because what Ella J went through with Tony Khan was just trash. And even though he apologized to her and everything, it's just, women deserve respect in wrestling media. And I really feel like the Women's Wrestling Talk is kind of like the Avengers of wrestling media, of women's wrestling media. And I'm just really honored and humbled to be a part of it in any way, shape, or form. So that was just beautiful. So that's really about it. And I'm just really happy that this podcast has grown to the point to where my followers have grown, because my Spotify Wrapped said that my followers had grown about maybe 200% or something like that. And people all over the world are listening to me, like people in the UK and Ireland and Singapore and stuff like that. And of course, people here in the US are listening to me too. And that just means the world to me. So hopefully, what I hope more of what will happen next year is, I guess, more exposure for myself and the Hardy Wrestling Podcast brand, and more people will actually buy my merchandise that I have on tpublic.com. It's the Hardy Wrestling Podcast store. My merch has been on sale for like $14. my Hardy Wrestling Podcast logo t-shirt has been on sale for $14 for the holidays. So please buy that. If you already haven't. If you love the show, please buy the merch. And hopefully, you know, I can just continue to grow more as a media person. You know, the sky's the limit. Shoot for the stars, aim for the moon. That's what Pop Smoke says. So, I'm just really happy this year in wrestling has just turned out to be one of the greatest. Not only just as a fan, but also as a professional as well. So, the Belladonna division is getting ready for their show Coronation, and we will crown our first ever Forbidden Elegance champion there on January the 15th at Gaston Mall. So if you haven't bought your tickets, please go. I'll be there. I'll be commentating. Aubrey Edwards will be having, who I interviewed, Aubrey Edwards will be having a referee seminar, and she'll be a part of the show as well. So please, you know, buy your tickets and come out. Like, the future is bright over here for your girl Stephanie, and none of this would happen if it wasn't for y'all listening and supporting and stuff like that, and sharing my clips and stuff. So that's all that I loved in wrestling this year, and hopefully next year will be even greater. All right, so we've reached the conclusion of this season finale of the Hardy Wrestling Podcast. As always, know you can follow the Hardy Wrestling Podcast on Instagram at Hardy Wrestling Podcast, and on Twitter at Hardy Wrestle Pod. And just continue to support the show. You can listen to it on all platforms: iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, my YouTube channel, The Hardy Wrestling Podcast, where you can see videos of the interviews that I've done, and just so many different things. You can also get a full audio clips of the show as well, and also just continue to listen on the Chairshot Media. You can listen to the podcast on there as well, and also SGP Radio, you can listen there as well. So thank you for this amazing year of wrestling and for the growth of the Hardy Wrestling Podcast. And also, please buy my merchandise on tpublic.com. Like, if you type in the Hardy Wrestling Podcast store, you'll see my logo and you'll see a purple wrestling ring in the background. That is the store. So if you want to buy a t-shirt, if you want to buy a mug, if you want to buy a hoodie, you can buy them in different colors. Like I said, they've been on sale for the holiday season. You can get a regular logo t-shirt for $14 and they'll ship it to you. So please buy my merch. And this is going to be the last episode of the Hardy Wrestling Podcast for a minute, because in my life, sometimes life throws a little bit of a curveball, and I've sort of been emotionally dealing with some stuff because my mother, who I love very much and who is a supportive of everything that I do, has been sick and she's in a hospital currently right now recovering from some stuff. And we've been trying to take care of her and oversee, her recovery and stuff like that. And it's been hard, but she is actually recovering in a positive way. So please continue to send your thoughts and prayers to the Hardy family, for real. And I'm going to also be preparing for the Belladonna Division show as well. So with all of that happening, this is going to be the last episode of the Hardy Wrestling Podcast for a minute. I'm going to still be watching wrestling and probably still be posting stuff from past episodes and stuff until I start creating new episodes later on next year. But for now, Stephanie needs to take some time to take care of herself, take care of her family, her mom, and also celebrate the holiday and just prepare for things that's coming up. And I know life can be really hard and throw you some curveballs at times, but the thing about life is you can either be really scared, because that's how I've been the past couple of weeks. You can either be really scared or trust and center yourself in however it is you center yourself, and push through and lean into the positive. Lean into the positive and believe that the best is always yet to come. And believe that truth and light will always win, even in the darkest of the dark. So that's what I'm trying to hold on to myself now in this stage of my life. And hopefully you can hold on to that as well. And like I said, I'm going to still be watching wrestling. I'm going to still, keep up with everything. But new episodes probably won't start until maybe a little bit later, maybe later in January into February, of course, because February will be the 2-year anniversary of the show. So please continue to support the show and support wrestling as a whole, not even just the mainstream wrestling, but also the independent wrestling that's in your hometown as well. And just continue to love each other and support each other, and most importantly, love yourself and take care of yourself, because you all you got. So with that in mind, I want to thank Aubrey Edwards for coming on my show and for being a great guest on this season finale of the Hardy Wrestling Podcast, and continue to follow her and support her wherever you see her. And until next time, this is the Hardy Wrestling Podcast with your girl Stephanie Hardy. Have a great holiday, have a great new year, watch day one and relax with the fam or whatever, and bye y'all.
Gearheads know that some projects need so many parts, it feels like you need a whole storage unit just to store them. That's what eBay Motors' 122 million parts are for. Think of it as your virtual parts garage. They've always got the right fitment at the right prices. Use the eBay Motors app or visit ebaymotors.com. Let's ride.
Some coffee's fast, but not fresh. Some coffee's fresh, but only after a long wait. Speedway coffee is made fresh at the push of a button, hot or iced, so you can have fresh coffee your way, right away. Find a store near you at speedway.com/locations.